Good morning and welcome to the Plunge with Derek Holser. Joining me today is the remarkable and singular Thalia Toha. I'm so grateful that she could join us for episode 3 of Tolkien's Greatest Characters. We are going to discuss Bilbo Baggins. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. It's a sunny afternoon on Bainbridge Island, Washington, and it looks like it's a sunny afternoon in the Rocky Mountains. Joining me is Thalia Toha. And Talia, I'm so grateful you could join us for Tolkien's Greatest Characters. How you doing?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be chatting with you on Tolkien, Bilbo, all of the things
That's
related
awesome.
to it. It's a great story.
Thank you. One of the things that attracted me is your own articles that you post frequently on Substack. And in our correspondence before we started this series, you mentioned that you were a bit of a place person. And I wondered if you'd be willing to tell us what that means and maybe along the way what your life has been about and what you do outside of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think places are something that I've always had to contend with throughout my life, and I didn't really understand that that was what's going on until fairly recently. I mean, a few years back, I think it was when kind of that revelation occurred when, oh, okay, so everything that I've been working on, my life's work, all of the changes, all of the things that are consistent with it had been surrounding places. And I think it is because of where I came from. So for people who don't know, I came from an island called Sumatra. Like that's where my family is from. And Sumatra is just north of the equator, about halfway around the world from America, exactly 11 hours and 12 hours apart, depending on daylight savings and everything. And that place is, it's so interesting because when you think of Sumatra, there are definitely developed and modern regions, but there are also regions where people still live very remotely and they're having to contend with exactly those things that I had to contend with throughout my life is how do we experience everything around us through you know where we're placed, our body, where we're positioned, social construct, all of that. And they have to do it rather at a very kind of visceral, raw level, because a lot of times these remote regions, you're really on your own with just a few people at a time, right? And it's really something that you think of bare essentials. That's exactly some of the situations that they're placed in. And I can remember times when I observed my grandmother and my grandfather and the way in which they respond to situations in their life. It's a lot of them is based on their relationship with places and the environment, the built and the natural environment, all of it. And I carried that with me. I mean, there was a moment in my life when it was a lot more complex and I didn't really understand anything about what I was trying to contend with, especially when civil unrest occurred in my country. It's a long story, but the short of it is that I ended up here. I got pushed out of the country. I was a minority that, for many reasons, political and otherwise, they did not necessarily want in that country. And so I had to leave. And I came here to the States, of all places. We did think about Australia, right? If you think about places, you're really trying to map, okay, if you want to leave your home, where do you go? You think of everything that is within reach, or sometimes out of reach that you want to make within reach. And for me and my family at the time, for some reason, it was the United States. And so when I came first to the United States, it was the Northeast. That's kind of where, for some reason, we just decided that was the place for me. My parents didn't come with me; I was on my own. To be perfectly honest, despite how beautiful it was, right, fall foliage, you hear about all these beautiful things in the Northeast, and they are beautiful. I did not like it at all. Right? I did not like it at all. And I didn't understand why. I knew that I was homesick. I knew that I wasn't responding to the food, the delicious food that I now love. I wasn't really responding to my friends, whom I now love as well, right at the time. It was just not something that I immediately sort of gravitate towards. And I again did not know why. And again, this occurred right throughout our lives as we get older. And so the kind of the underlying theme around it is, where am I, what's my place in life? And of course, when you go through the iterations of life and you realize that there are places that are friendlier towards you, there are places that are not friendly towards you, and you start to kind of understand and you see things a little clearer. And that is really where my interest in architectural preservation, history, architectural history, geography, all of that sort of come together. I think that was my, the slightest way that I can professionally and personally understand what is going on. And so that is really how I kind of came to be very, very interested, and still is very interested in sort of the topic of places.
Oh, can I ask how old you were when you came here?
Yeah, well, I was old enough to do everything and function independently. I was in the teens, I think it was mid-teens. So I was kind of past the puberty phase, but I was still slightly below the, the adult age limit. And it was definitely, yeah, I was old enough to be able to function on my own, of course, but I was young enough to not have formed a full understanding of who I am. And I think
Sure.
that was part of the reason why now, at least, I feel, because of that experience, I'm very adamant in my belief that I think, despite wherever you're placed in life, I do think that anyone should be able to choose how their story ends. More importantly, where their story ends, right? I mean, you could choose how, but like, you want to land at a place where, not just physically and environmentally, you want to land at a place where you're not at odds with everything. I think that was probably why, because that was a great question, because maybe if I had moved earlier or later, it would have completely it's just a completely different experience. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. I I I have a question with respect to your philosophy on the point you just made, that it's important that a person choose where their story ends. And you also referenced how their story ends. But I guess I would ask you, because it strikes me, at least in our culture in America, that how is far more significant in what we're deciding than where. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is actually a great conversation, right? And the
Yeah.
question is why? Why is it more important
Right.
in yeah, no, that is a great question.
Because the
Um,
question is always, what are you going to do when you grow up? Not where are you going to be?
right, right. This is true. And of course, as adults now, we realize that the where is just as important, if not maybe even more important, you know, in some ways, depending on how you look at it. I think maybe the how, it's part of the prescription of the modern programming, right? Like, because we want to have sort of a programmatic ideal on, sort of a step by step almost, on how to get from point A to point B, and any deviation or variation from that programming, it's we're uncomfortable with it. I think we're uncomfortable with the path that is least walk. We're uncomfortable with the fact that maybe to get where we want, we're not going to get the whatever, the prestige, right? The money, the comfort, the house, the type of outward presentation that is subjected to us and are being kind of programmed in our upbringing. And I think that might be the reason why. It's because that methodical. And I think there are virtues to wanting to have that method, um, I forget who the name of the theologian who talked about this, but of course he talked about the finite and infinite, goals, and the finite being having so many more sort of obvious, visible markers and milestones, and the infinite having a little less so, but the two must coexist within the context of each other. And I think because because of the way that humans are just finite bodies, right? Like, so that, I think, by definition, it's easier for us to understand the finite than it is for us to understand the infinite. And so the finite ways in which we understand how to get to a place, so much easier to understand and say, oh yeah, that's how you get there. That's how you become a person who has it all or whatever, right? But then I think the where is something that I kind of came upon accidentally. I realized there was one time when I was working in sort of a corporate environment when I realized that the the people that I was working with, there are a few people who were kind of considered sort of at the top of their game, right? The cream of the crop. They're sort of there, they're veterans. But then when I look at their lives, I wasn't responding to it. And it wasn't really they weren't really the type of people who I necessarily aspired to be. And not because their accolades were, eye-wateringly amazing. It's just because I didn't really want to be the kind of parent that they are, or rather aren't, to their kids. I don't really want to be the type of grandparents that they are not to their grandkids. And I also did not want to be the type of friend or coworker that they definitely are not to me. So that was really an eye-opening moment for me when I realized that, oh, okay, the decisions a lot of times should be around, is that the type of person that I want to be, and is that where I want to be? And not so much, well, they got there because of, this prescribed method. But that is a great point there, Derek. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you brought it up, so
Yeah.
uh, that really I'll have to spend some time after our conversation to reflect on my own path and the choices that led me to where I am today.
Yeah. Are you an
But
attorney? I didn't
uh,
ask, but
yeah, so my background is I've occupied three lanes over the course of my life vocationally, and that is educator, attorney, and author. And I am currently full time as the author part. So I haven't practiced law since 2023, and but I enjoyed it, and it was it's a beautiful experience to be able to help people overcome a lot of the unnecessary obstacles that the system presents. So, a lot of complications and language that make it very cumbersome for the layperson to navigate the judicial system or just relationships contractually, etc. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It could be a really great help, right?
yes,
Potentially
yes. I
help.
hope I hope that I was a help.
Only they get to decide.
That's right. That's right.
We can only.
Um, Speaking of where we end up and making that a priority, Tolkien's description of places is well known for perhaps being over the top for the modern ear. But I'm curious because the character you've chosen, Bilbo, is a hobbit. And I think that of all the different types of beings in Middle Earth, they all are very associated with their place. But it seems as though the Shire itself is a part of who the hobbits are. And I'd love for you to tell me why you chose Bilbo and maybe reflect on the Shire.
Yeah, Bilbo is such a great character in my opinion. And truthfully, I didn't directly relate to him because I couldn't understand the Shire that doesn't really exist in our current world as a structure, right? Like, I mean, we hope, and there are people who come close to that version, but not quite. And so it was hard for me originally to associate with Bilbo. But when I started understanding the storyline that Tolkien drew up in his world, his magnificent world, I kind of started to, that's when I started to gravitate towards Bilbo. And I think it's mostly because he's the most relevant one that I can associate with of all creatures. I think the elves are far too heavenly and majestic for me. Beautiful creatures, right? And even the humans, right? Aragon and all these amazing people, there is a sense that their heroism is something that I will never be able to attain in some sense. And one would aspire to it, but it seems very difficult to get there for me. And so Bilbo was this one creature that I thought, oh, okay, I understand him. I understand why he likes his comfort. I understand why he loves the Shire, loves Baggin. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Right.
Yeah, everything within reach, beautiful woodland area. It's just such a place of comfort, and that's really where, going back to what we were talking about on where we want to end, in my viewpoint, that's where I want to end, right? Like, I want to be in a place eventually where I am just everything is comfortable mostly, right? And that might not be in this world, but that's still something that you'd hope to come back to every night. You just want that level of comfort. And Bilbo has that in the beginning of the story, right? You see the Shire bag in specifically fit it to his needs, his size, definitely, his physical size, but definitely his needs. Everything was there for him to take, and there's nothing really wanting. There's nothing really quite left for him to, oh, I want to blow up the, bag in and create this giant McMansion. That's not at all the beginning of the story.
Yeah. There's
He
no
ends
high-rise apartments.
right, yeah, skyscraper, right? um, corner office. That's not at all what he wanted, and that's not at all what he was presented with. And I like that. I like that he actually began with where most people would like to end. I think that's interesting because a lot of stories open with the concept that the primary character, the primary hero, is largely at odds with their life somehow, right? Like they're either an orphan, something severely gets taken away from them, and you do see that later, right? Like with Bilbo for sure. But that's not the opening of the Hobbit was not at all presented in that way initially, and I thought that was interesting because immediately you see sort of the ideal, right? The idyllic ideal of a place. And you're confronted as a reader, oh, do I like this or not? Is this where, for me anyways, I get to ask, is this kind of a story that I want to kind of follow? Is this a story where I want to end with? Are they going to circle back to this? Does it come full circle back to the Shire? Um, but I think Tolkien, the way I really do appreciate, eventually I did really appreciate Tolkien, not initially, because when I was learning English, that was one of the first books that got introduced to me was The Hobbit. And when you're just learning English, The Hobbit is on the heavy side.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
That was one of the first books that got introduced to me by my teacher, actually. And boy, does she know what she's doing when she gave that book to me, because I didn't, and I certainly didn't for many years after that. But eventually I did. That eventually I came to that because his descriptions are very lengthy. It's a very gradual and visual process, and he doesn't really just go, oh, there's this village and the next village is that, right? Like, he takes you through the entire path of where the character is going, which is interesting, right? It's just interesting because stylistically, of course, that doesn't necessarily exist much here anymore. And I think that's partially because of the speed of commerce that we're dealing with now. Everything has to be so expedient. And so attention and all the other things play into it. But back when Tolkien, was writing, I think that was a little bit more common. Not a lot of people maybe write the way that wrote the way that he did, but it was still something that I think really serves the story, because now you get a picture of what a Bilbo's heaven looks like. You know, you get a picture of what his ideal situation looks like, and it's not often that you get that beyond sort of the cloudy, mystical element that is pictured in a lot of idyllic imageries. A lot of times it's very vague and very
Right.
opaque, and you kind of just get that, oh, it's either, out of this world or underworld, right? Like you don't really get kind of the textural element of it, as if you almost can touch it in this world. I think that's the bit that I think the Shire gives that, right? Because you can almost smell the spring. You can almost feel the heat of, the midsummer that they're experiencing, and you can almost feel the breeze that is making Bilbo on the comfortable side in the Shire. Um, and so, and again, even Baggin, the way that he named Tolkien named Baggin, right? Like you're, oh, Baggin, and he's Bilbo Baggins. Why is that? That's interesting that a place is named after a person. Imagine if my place is named after me, right? Like you start to kind of create really visceral imagination that hits on a lot of the modern sentiment, even today, like modern today, not just modern Tolkien, but modern today, but is very relevant still to the story and serves the story. Bag End being the end of this Bilbo Baggins, and Bilbo Baggins, his first name being Baggins. I don't know really, but that's how I interpret it. That his entry is his last name, Baggins, and his place of ownership is Bag End. So that's kind of the dual bookending of his name. I think that's how I interpret it. Um, so immediately you see the geography of a person within his house, within his town, and within his name. And I think that's the remarkable part of Bilbo's story. And a lot of remarkable things, but that's one of the most
Yeah.
remarkable things, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that comes to mind as I'm listening to you depict not only your experience reading it in, learning English with that text, what an impression that must have left on you. Maybe frustration, but as you describe, ultimately some real insight with respect to the teacher being pretty savvy and giving you that book. I'm curious as to the rhythms of a place, and the reflection of those rhythms within the characters' day-to-day lives. And I think of one of the funny scenes with the group of hobbits, separate from Bilbo, but where they're talking about all the meals that they have in the Shire, and you know, isn't it interesting how a place has its own rhythms? And what really interests me in this topic is how we go to great lengths for brief periods to experience the rhythms of another place to attempt to settle ourselves when we go back to our other place. Anyway,
No, you're absolutely right about the rhythm, because if you think about Bilbo being very comfortable in the beginning of the story, that's sort of like, if we're talking geography, that's sort of his sea level, right? Like that's his point zero, 0 degrees sea level, where most things are neutral, right? You're neither extremely sad or extremely happy. You're good. And I think of Bilbo being at that sea level rhythm, as you call it. And when the when the call comes to him to venture forth, right, that rhythm gets disturbed. That sea level starts to rock a little bit, and you see that disturbance in the form of chaos, somewhat, right? The entrance of somebody going and coming into your house, not necessarily with invitation, somebody else invited, right? There is this kind of, it's not just a disturbance, it's almost a transgression. And if you want to take it all the way, it's almost a violation to come into someone's house uninvited in a lot of ways. Not just inviting yourself, you're inviting multitudes of your friends, right? When Gandalf introduces the whole company, I think that is when Bilbo starts to kind of feel something that he hasn't felt before. It's almost like a tsunami, a tidal wave of some sort to his geographical sea level. And the chaos initially, of course, not something that he liked, right? Because it's kind of akin to being thrown into the ocean and having not really knowing quite how to surf or swim. Sort of, you can kind of doggy paddle, perhaps, and it's frustrating. Like that's kind of the word that you were using when you're describing my experience thrown into this really heavy text when I was just learning English. It was very, very similar in that that disturbance is kind of like a sonar frequency. It really kind of hits, it really hits in a way that it hasn't before. And so the levels start to rock. And but then within that disturbance, most of which he views negatively at that time, it's something kind of leaves a mark, right? It's kind of the same. Surfers talk about this is when they when you go out into the sea, a lot of times you just can't, you don't really have much success, right? And sometimes you go the entire day even trying to kind of ride that wave. Maybe you'll get one, two, or three good ones if you're just learning. There is a ratio. I don't know if it's necessarily scientific or anything where people say for every 7 times you go out into the waves, then you can ride one wave, one good wave. And that's when you can kind of sort of feel everything within within your reach, the waves, everything is working for you. And you get to ride that wave and everything feels like flying. And I think there is something about the way that Gandalf and the company were introduced that really is aligned to something like that, where you get a really big chunk of understanding of what the depths of chaos might look like and the depths of darkness might look like when you have absolutely no control over your life, your house, and your territory. But at the same time, you get to feel all of the, kind of the visceral beauty that comes with it, companionship, friendship, the look on someone's eyes when they tell you that they've lost their home and they want to try to reclaim it, and that this is something that was taken away from them. And that's something that you can't really understand when you're just at sea level. You're just an observer viewing from the coastlines, seeing everything from safety. Those are things that you can't really get without venturing into the realms of some level of insecurity, some level of breaking down that door and allowing people to trespass in some ways. And I think human geography talks about that a lot, right? Like when one person is overlapping with the existence of another, we talk about personal space, we talk about privacy, we talk about is it your time and place to do that, right? It's not the time and place to do that. So all of those elements were very, very real from the opening chapters of The Hobbit for sure. And Bilbo's story, you really get to see how that developed, that disturbance and what you're calling rhythm.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just perceiving such a resonance, not with any detail, but just my active imagination in your own forced transition from one home to a totally foreign land. Yeah, I have no parameters for comprehending the magnitude of the effect that that would have had in your life and the residual, I guess if you use the wave metaphor, waves that perhaps continue to this day for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really something that I mean, I'm glad that you brought that up because it's the best way I can describe somebody when somebody asks me, "Well, what was it like?" The best way that I can describe that is almost like you are inhabiting a version of you that hasn't existed yet before, right? When you're trying to adapt into an entirely new situation, whether it's Bilbo or me, right, being thrown into this situation, or you moving state to state, right, whatever it is 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 a process of inhabiting a space that we imagine, whether that's positive or negative, that's really ultimately up to us, right? But it's almost like there are times when I remember that because of the construct of language, right, and the way that languages transfer a particular type of culture, a particular type of way of speaking, a particular way of thinking. People say things get lost in translation, but the reality is, I think by translating, a lot of times it's not even a matter of loss or gain. It's a matter of switchbacks. There are moments when I feel like I can't even try to express everything that I'm trying to express in my language in English. Like it's just not
Yeah.
possible. It isn't until I fully abandon that it becomes reasonable and it becomes tangible. And maybe Bilbo, in that example of when when his house is it's just havoc, right? Like it's just I think maybe that's sort of the feeling when suddenly everything is not the way that it should be. There's no order. It's not even just lack of order, it's just no order at all, not in the way that he used to define it. Um, yeah.
So Bilbo is very disrupted, and what's interesting, I've two follow-ups to that. The first to me is the interrupter, Gandalf, is a character that is, I would say, by and large, one that most readers or viewers of the films likes, right? He's a very critical, positive, even messianic figure at one point, right? And so, how would you describe the maybe there's a distinction to be made between the necessary disruption. Is there such a thing as a necessary disruption in our life that is only recognized in hindsight, or is that a matter of us just trying to make peace with disconnected elements that should have never been interrupted? So that's kind of my thought on Gandalf as the instigator of that. And then I'd love any thoughts you have on that. And then from there, Bilbo's resourcefulness, adaptability to the circumstances he's now thrust into without it being his choice.
Yeah. 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 I think disruption, it's interesting that word disruption, right? It's kind of like the versions of that word, depending on how you talk about it. It could be friction, it could be it could be friction, it could be traction, which has a positive connotation, right? But it could also be the negative side if you want to look at friction as a place that withholds something that withholds somebody and keeps them in a certain place. That could be negative. And I think on the question of necessary disruption or not, I think this is where the sea level comes about, right? Like the sea level comes about because when you think of just nature, like the way that nature works and the sea level that we have right now, most of the time they're pretty level, right? Most of the time they're pretty level. But once in a while, earthquakes hit, and suddenly that tidal wave, again, going back to that metaphor, that tidal wave comes back. And it's really sometimes not until a tidal wave of certain magnitude comes about that you really understand, oh, I want to ride that, or oh, I don't want to ride that. So, and I think there's an element of entropy. I don't know if you're familiar with the Right, you're familiar with the entropy. Yeah, so there's almost an element where certain amount of levelness need to accumulate before you're ready, or you would respond to that tidal call in some ways, right? Like it's kind of like a rest and workout period, right? You need a certain amount of rest, but then when it comes to it, you need to get back up and get back to it. But you can't just like be constantly, I mean, you could for some people, but it depends on the person's. I know I need about 3, 5 days in recovery before I have the very, very intense workout, right? Like if we're going down to that level.
Yeah,
Um, but disturbance, I think, I think disturbance is when definition happens, delineation happens, is when things take shape, right? And you get to shape it. It's kind of like when it's kind of like if you're thinking about sports, right? And if you're thinking about soccer or football or these all these kind of entertainment sports, they have to happen within a certain boundary of a field. They can't just be like, oh, all across the United States, you can play this one game that you're trying to win. And it's not that winning is the goal at all. It's just that, again, when we're talking finite measures and in this form, disturbance is kind of a unit of finite measurement, actually, right? Because it's disturbed in a certain framework, certain period, and certain time frame, certain area. So it's not like if you're disturbed in kind of the extended way, like all over your life all the time, that's not really disturbance because there's breathing involved. That's
sure.
just overall. That's an overall existence so much. So I think I don't know if that makes sense, but it's sort of that it is necessary for certain finite actions and reactions, I think. But if you're talking about something more infinite, yes, it is necessary, but I think it plays perhaps in a different way. But that's my personal opinion. A lot of other people have different opinions about that. But I think Bilbo in the case of Gandalf, Gandalf is kind of like the opposite of Bilbo, right? He has it together. He has everything together. He's got the staff, he's got the tall hat, he's got the presence, he's got the wisdom that you're looking for when you're embarking in this very ominous, dark journey that you know nothing of. And you want something like that as sort of the pole again measures the amount that maybe you have to live up to in some ways, right? Like if Bilbo is sort of the reluctant one, right? Gandalf is not at all reluctant. He is very much into this mission that they're embarking upon. And I think that contrast not only is it necessary in storytelling, but it's also necessary in the formation of a person, the meaning of a person. So I think that's your question on whether it's necessary or not. It's definitely necessary for the story.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is there a part in the arc of Bilbo's story that has particular resonance for you personally as you've read it or reflected on it, either personally or with connection to your passion for places and, as you say, architectural integrity and preservation?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, I mean, there's so many great moments for Bilbo, but I do love his encounter with the ring. I definitely think that's one of the very crucial element of the story because in a lot of ways that ring, yes, it's the one ring to rule it all, to rule all, but the reality is Bilbo was looking for a way to become a crucial and critical element, of this journey, right? Like he's trying to kind of live up to the expectations. Oh, and he's trying to prove everyone wrong. He's trying to prove that, yeah, I am kind of the burglar that Gandalf is promising. I am kind of that person. I can weave through places. I can be completely undetected and come out with the Arkenstone, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think he was looking for that because at first he had a ton of self-doubt. I don't think he was all that comfortable with the role that's been given to him, right? You can kind of sense that he's like, well, am I really the burglar? You know, why? Who says that I haven't really done any of that? Right? Why am I suddenly the, kind of the appointed person to be able to, get to Smaug? I think that's part of his dilemma. He didn't understand why he was thrusted into this position. And this manifests in our lives in many ways, right? Like kind of the at workplace, sometimes we're called upon to do things that we think that we can do it, but we're not sure if we can be all that necessarily, right?
Right. Right.
Right? And
Yeah.
parenting, book writing, everything becomes sort of this question of can I or can I not do it? And so his when he discovered that ring, it was almost like he was finding that magic wand. I mean, it is a magical ring in a lot of ways, but he was looking for that magic wand that does it all, for the lack of better words. Like it just does it all. Like it gives him the position, it gives him the power, it gives him the prestige that he was looking for. And I think that was when I realized that, oh, okay, so the ring, I mean, beyond the fight between good and evil, right, beyond this amazing storyline that Tolkien built, I think on an elemental level, we all just want something that really solves it all. And I think Gandalf, even as a person, as the leader almost, right, of that group, you kind of see times when that group was hoping that Gandalf would show up. And even as readers, you're like, where's Gandalf in this at this point of the story, right? We want Gandalf to show up. Doesn't this isn't this so much easier if Gandalf is here? It would all just be completely fine if Gandalf, right? So even it starts with the ring and then Gandalf seeking help, right, from the elves. Lady Galadriel was Gandalf's help and aid in some ways, and Lady Galadriel relies on the elves rely on, right? So there's this whole sort of ripple effect of every element of the story is really needing or wanting, rather, right? I don't know if they necessarily need it. They're wanting something that solves it all. And I think that was really something that resonates with me because what it meant is that it really doesn't matter, right? How big, how small, how amazing, how rich, how powerful, how anything we are. There will always be an element that we want to kind of that we are needing external definition and external something, and that could be something that is justified. That could also just be something that is again inherent in our programming in a lot of
Yeah. Interesting. Sorry, did I cut you off?
no, no, you're good, you're good.
Yeah. The ring, like so many things, it's interesting to me to explore the extent to which the human psyche has little talismans that embolden us. Even if, now in the ring's case, it really has power, but I think there are situations, there are dynamics where people will have, I think of snow globes. Like, there's something about connecting ourselves to something beyond our limitations and even our insecurities that can embolden you and discover that you had it all along, but you needed this device, this talisman, this token to activate it. Is that a fair point? Question? Line of
Absolutely.
thinking?
I think it's a very fair point, right? It's absolutely a fair point because if you look at the the structure of a lot of animistic villages and animistic communities right now, there's the sort of the lore of the medicine man, medicine woman, and they always carry a staff. And in a lot of different cultures, that staff is not just a staff because they need something to lean on necessarily. A lot of the belief actually revolves around that staff having an actual embodied meaning into it, right? Be it spirit or whatever you want to call it. Of course, every different groups have different beliefs on what that means. But either way, it's more than just an object. So your point on the talisman is absolutely on point because it's kind of also like when we are thinking about ideas, we really can't make sense of it just quite yet until we put it down on paper, right? It's not necessarily that the paper is has all of the power. It's just we can't see it all within us. We need something that is projected outside externally that represents that, embodies that, kind of really creates a form, a structure that we can then see back and understand, see back, hear back, experience back, whatever that means. And I think that is part of the talisman because the talisman is everything that happened at the time, but it's also everything that happened since, right? Because when we look back at the talisman, the staff, the book, the journal, whatever it is that you're creating or you're carrying, you now have a built-in perspective, meaning, and landscape applied onto that object. So now it's even richer because now, when you created that talisman, when you found it, the ring, when you created the journal, that idea that you jot down, now you've had days, weeks, months, years on top of that that can then inform what that means. So that is exactly why these things, I mean, not to say that, to make these objects really something that is beyond us necessarily. It's just an extension and projection of all of the greatness and flaws that are within us, because without those things, it's very difficult actually to create a clear perception. It's kind of like movies, even like when you think of movies, movies are actually they are created, and a lot of movie makers and cinematographers can talk about this a lot more deeply, but they consist of different frames, right? Multiple frames. It's kind of like a picture book that you kind of flip and then it creates almost a cartoon movement, but then page by page, they're all very still. So these stills are kind of like a chance for us to take us out of time and see, oh, that's what that meant that time, right, at that very particular instance. And without these stills, frames, talisman, objects, creation, writing, books, is very, very hard for most people to be able to make sense of everything that we think about and experience. So, yeah, that's a really great point.
I'm grinning because you have, thank you, you have touched on, you have referenced the finite and the infinite multiple times. And these implements, rings, books, etc., it seems to me that we are forever trying to capture and contain the infinite in finite means because that is what we have to work with. But we perpetually are seeking and trying to connect to the infinite. Whether we call it a spirituality, we call it, cosmology, whatever, that seems to be a big part of what's going on in the human existence. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so I want to touch on that with the ring and portals, if you would, as a compressing space for people, whether it be the ability to see with a palantir or the ability to disappear and move undetected. But this notion of the ring being used in such a way that the limitations of the finite are not restraining the person who has the ring. Your thoughts?
That's a great, great synthesizing of what we were talking about. I think absolutely 100% on the portal quality of the ring, right? And it's even described very clearly, very literally by Tolkien. You wear the ring, you get into this other world, and I think there's a reason why it's sort of a ring and not like a door necessarily. He could have easily created, that door of Baggin to become the portal to another world. I mean, Lewis did that with the wardrobe, right? Like there are different ways to do that. But I think with the ring, it kind of creates a very tangible, touchable, right? You insert your index finger into the ring, a one-click wonder, actually, if you think about kind of the modern analogy, right? You just kind of go like that and you're there.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more accessible, I think, and that's the magic of it, right? If you think about a magic wand, something that solves everything, it has to be as a story in the story, like it has to be just as magically possible as you can make it, and that makes it means that it has to be as accessible as possible as well. And though, of course, this is not to, I love Narnia and Lewis, of course, that's another conversation. And other portals in other stories as well. But I think the intention on it being a ring that is mostly right, that is mostly worn. I don't know if Tolkien meant it for it to be like that, but as a researcher, right, as a geographer, architectural historian, like that's my reading of it. Is when you look at a map, the reason why a map is laid out in a certain way with longitude and latitudes, legends, is so that you can point your finger to it and say, this is where I want to go, right? So that finger is quite important, actually. The reality that it needs to be something that is at the very tip and at the very extension of our body, right? And you see kind of the inverse happening when um, when the ring is worn on Frodo's neck or whatever, right? Like, of course, the effects. There's other things involved because now at this point it's starting to be consuming, right, and all these other things. But I think from a symbolism perspective, when you wear the ring around your neck, on a necklace, you don't really get to enter the portal. You just get sort of the excess surplus waste of that portal, sort of the corrosive element of that portal, right? Um, it's a very, very complex structure, and I think that's the way I read it when I read kind of the structure of the ring. But portal is definitely something that is necessary in being able to kind of take you from one place to another. And I do think that that ring is very essential.
Very cool. Um, any thoughts that you have with respect to Smaug's lair and when it comes to places? Um, because obviously Bilbo and Smaug have a meaningful and unique encounter. And as we've talked about Tolkien's depiction of places and your own passion and work, I'd love any reflections you have about that. I know I didn't reference that in any of our previous correspondence. I hate to put you on the spot, but that's what came to my mind.
Yeah, Smaug is, it's again, that contrast plays very, very intricately, especially when you kind of compare, when you put Bilbo, tiny little Bilbo, in comparison with this giant uh, dragon, is just kind of uh, the ultimate of everything horrific and powerful and all-consuming, right? Is the Smaug. And I think that contrast is necessary. There's a reason why it's not Gandalf who encountered necessarily came face to face debating Smaug because it wouldn't feel, quite lopsided, right?
Right.
And with Bilbo being who he is, not quite having anything else besides his wit and that ring, that becomes interesting, right? And the question that we'll ask becomes, well, is he going to wear the ring in this situation? Is he going to just try to talk his way out, right? And you see him doing both at different times and kind of timed the situation necessarily. I think Smaug sitting on top of that mound of wealth, I think that is a very telling story, right? Like you could be all powerful. You could be all, the most fearsome creature that nobody ever want to touch or get near, and yet, and have all the wealth under your belly, quite literally, and yet you can't quite go anywhere, right? Because like the minute that he leaves,
Yeah.
all of that treasure is going to be claimed by various different people, and that's interesting in terms of uh, freedom and imprisonment in that scale of size. Like, I mean, if we're talking about kind of our level of perception, if we're even just talking about wealth directly, right? A lot of, and you see this a lot of wealthy people say that it is quite a lot of work to be wealthy, right? Like, and that's definitely true in some ways. There's a lot of management, maintenance, and it comes with a whole host of ties that doesn't necessarily give you the flexibility to do the things that you could have without those ties. And, like Bilbo, Shire was beautiful for sure, but it wasn't quite the representation of wealth, power, and prestige that necessarily the world prescribed, right? So, and then he gets to choose. I can leave this comfort. It is my comfort, but it isn't necessarily the world's definition of comfort per se. It's a small house, right? All these other things. Um, but the layer and is it dragon sickness, right? Like these are the things that is, of course, when we tell these stories to our kids, like it just seems obvious. But then, as adults, like we're still entrapped sometimes in these situations, right? Like we still end up in situations where we make the wrong call based on the salary that we chose. Right?
Yeah.
It just um, I think there's a reason. There's a very very clear reason why that lair. It wasn't Thorin who necessarily defeated Smaug. It was or argued with Smaug, right? Like it wasn't him that outwitted Smaug, and definitely not Gandalf. I think there's a reason why it goes to the lowest common denominator. Although eventually we see that he's not quite the lowest common denominator.
Right. Right. Well, I just think of the Wayans brothers did a movie. I think it was the Wayans brothers a while back. I mean, many years now. Mo money, mo problems.
Yeah.
But certainly a reality. Well, I have had just a blast, Talia. One final parting question, if you don't mind, and particularly given whatever you want to reflect on with your own experience, but also from your just incredible opinion that I've come to value in just this brief exchange. The idea of home, adventure, and heroism as Bilbo's arc unfolds. Any thoughts or final thoughts you have on that? I'd be most grateful.
Yeah, home. What a loaded word, right?
Right.
This is really the word that it will forever live in human history. And because there's so much meaning to it. When I was younger, I thought home was a place. And then when I got older, I realized that it could be people. It could be people. Home is a people. And when I was yet older, it could be the memories. It could be God. It could be, all of that together. I think home, I really struggled with it when I was, well, I think in some ways still now, I think I really struggled with that word because it colloquially, it meant that there is a pinpoint location but in reality, that's not at all what it is. It's not place so much, it's almost space. It's
Hmm.
almost movement. There's something that's happening within it. It's alive. It's not static. Home, I think for for Bilbo is definitely going back to Bag End. And when he realized that, well, everything stays the same. Shire is good. Bag End is good, but now I'm different. Now I know all these things. Now I've been scarred, and I've ripped my heart open and nearly died to save the world in a lot of ways. That's what Bilbo would think, right? And then he wasn't really getting the kind of the hero welcome necessarily, somewhat, but not quite. And I think that was part of the reason why he wanted to disappear, right? As well during that birthday party,
Right.
um, and so I think that happens to all of us. Like I remember a time when I went home, and it's to no fault of anyone really in my family. Everyone's fine. My friends, everyone's fine. But it just wasn't the same, and I felt like I was distanced from them in a way that no physical place can explain. It was just I was a different person. I carry all this different meaning and understanding of places and home,
Yeah.
and that meant that home is a moving target, and it might even be a moving target that recur within each of us, and we're simply the nexus from which past and our future uh, travel and journey and voyage through. Right, we're kind of at the intersection of all of that. So it's a very complex topic. I think about it all the time. I love that you asked that question because it meant that I'm not the only one who's thinking about it. But yeah, I've so enjoyed this conversation. Thanks
Oh,
so much for this conversation. It was
thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that we would all find our way to identify and seek home wherever it is and make it so, as Bilbo found his way. Thank you again, Talia.
absolutely. Thanks, Derek.
Our guest today was Thalia Toha. Wasn't she fantastic? I'm so thankful again that she would join us and share her thoughts and insights, both from her own experience and also from her understanding of the story of Bilbo and the Shire and the Ring and all of Middle Earth. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Thalia Toha is an architectural historian, geographer, and preservationist. She believes that everyone should be able to choose how their story ends regardless of how they're placed, regardless of where they're placed in life. Her interest in studying hidden ways in which places impact people's story arcs led her from Princeton University to restoring 15,000 square foot town halls, to advising the development of food halls, to serving as a geography exhibit designer in Lafayette Museum. Talia's insights have been featured on Architectural Digest, Self Magazine, and Homes and Gardens. When she's not busy with her interdisciplinary work, you can find her writing about the philosophy at storyarcs.substack.com. Thanks again, Talia. Simply amazing. Today's episode of The Plunge has 3 sponsors, so I hope you enjoy. These excerpts come from a fascinating quarterly magazine called Lapham's Quarterly. I think it's fantastic. And the title of this quarterly is Home. So I'd like to read a couple of thoughts and a poem since they sponsored this episode. The first is from St. Teresa of Avila, circa 1582. God walks among the pots and pans. Our second one is from William Edmonstone Itoon in 1845. I apologize, William, to your heirs if I've mispronounced it. The thought is this: the earth is all the home I have, the heavens my wide roof tree. Lastly, we are sponsored by Oh, the Places You'll Go by Theodore Geisel, also known as Dr. Seuss. Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places, you're off and away. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know, and you are the guy who'll decide where to go. You'll look up and down streets, look 'em over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not-so-good street. And you may not find any you'll want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's opener there, in the wide open air. Out there things can happen and frequently do to people as brainy and footsy as you. And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew. Just go right along, you'll start happening too. Oh, the places you'll go. You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights, you'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed, you'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest. Except when you don't. Because sometimes you won't. I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true. That bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch, and your gang will fly on, you'll be left in a lurch. You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and the chances are then that you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're darked. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if you go in, should you turn left or right? Or right and 3/4, or maybe not quite? Or go around back and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you will find, for a mind maker upper to make up his mind. You can get so confused that you'll start into race down long wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace, and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, toward a most useless place, the waiting place. For people just waiting, waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. No, that's not for you. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing. With banner flip-flapping once more you'll ride high, ready for anything under the sky. Ready because you're that kind of guy. Oh, the places you'll go, there is fun to be done. There are points to be scored, there are games to be won. And the magical things you can do with that ball will make you the winningest winner of all. Fame! You'll be as famous can be, with the whole wide world watching you win on TV. Except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too, games you can't win 'cause you'll play against you. All alone, whether you like it or not. Alone will be something, you'll be quite a lot. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll meet things that scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much you won't want to go on. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. On you will go, though your enemies prowl. On you will go, though the hackin' cracks howl. Onward up many a frightening creek, though your arms may get sore and your sneakers may leak. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. And and will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. So, be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Alley Van Allen O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way. Thank you, Dr. Seuss, for Oh, the Places You'll Go, and for sponsoring today's episode of The Plunge.